Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into hiring TestNG developers.
Sounds good.
Finding good developers is tough no matter what,
It can be.
especially when you're not really sure you know what to look for in the first place.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But hey, good news is theperfectdeveloper.com has all sorts of resources to help you find the perfect developer.
They really do.
So while we're doing this deep dive, keep that in mind and head over to theperfectdeveloper.com and check it out if you're thinking about hiring.
Definitely.
Like right now, go try their 5 questions thing.
It's awesome.
So speaking of finding the perfect developer, let's talk about TestNG developers.
Okay.
To start off, what is TestNG anyway? We all use apps and websites every day, and we know how frustrating it is when they don't work right.
Right, like when things are slow or glitchy or just crash all the time.
Exactly.
Well, TestNG is a tool that helps developers make sure that doesn't happen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a Java framework for automated testing.
So what does that mean?
It means that instead of having to manually test everything themselves, developers can write scripts to do it for them automatically.
So it's kind of like having a robot QA team.
Yeah, exactly. That way they can catch bugs early on before they even get to users.
And avoid those embarrassing crashes.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
It also makes the whole development process faster and more efficient.
That's always a plus.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so TestNG sounds pretty important, but what exactly does a TestNG developer do all day?
Good question.
Like, what are their responsibilities?
Well, basically, they're responsible for making sure the software is high quality.
Okay.
So they spend their days creating and running tests, analyzing the results, and working with developers to fix any bugs they find.
So they're not just like sitting around waiting for things to break. They're actively trying to prevent that from happening.
Exactly. They're like the guardians of quality.
I like that.
They might be writing scripts to test a new feature or making sure the checkout process is secure or just making sure everything runs smoothly.
So it's a pretty crucial role.
Yeah, definitely. It's especially nowadays when software is so complex.
Makes sense.
There's a lot that can go wrong.
Okay, so let's say I'm convinced I need a TestNG developer on my team.
Great.
What skills should I be looking for?
Well, obviously, they need to have a strong understanding of Java.
That makes sense since TestNG is a Java framework.
Right.
But is that all?
No, of course not.
What else?
They also need to be proficient in Selenium WebDriver.
Selenium WebDriver, what's that?
It's a tool that lets them automate web browsers.
Oh, okay, so they could use it to like click buttons and fill out forms and stuff like that.
Exactly, all automatically.
That's pretty cool.
It is, yeah. It's also good if they have experience with CI/CD pipelines.
CI/CD pipelines, what are those?
They're basically systems that automate the process of building, testing, and deploying software.
So it's like a way to make sure the software is always up to date and working properly.
Exactly.
Wow, sounds like there's a lot to it.
There is.
So they need a mix of technical skills, but they also need to understand the bigger picture.
Right. They need to be able to see how their work fits into the overall development process.
Makes sense.
And of course, they need to have good soft skills like communication and problem solving.
Oh yeah, those are always important.
Definitely, even the best coder won't get very far if they can't communicate effectively or work well with others.
Absolutely. So it's all about finding the right balance.
Exactly.
So that's where theperfectdeveloper.com comes in.
Right.
They can help you find TestNG developers who have all the right skills and experience.
Yep, and they can help you through the whole hiring process.
From start to finish.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so let's say I'm ready to start interviewing TestNG developers.
Okay.
What are some essential questions I should ask?
Well, that's a great question, and it's where a lot of people get stuck.
Really?
Yeah, they're not sure what questions to ask to really assess a candidate's TestNG expertise.
What do you recommend?
Well, theperfectdeveloper.com has a whole bunch of great resources on this, but one of the most important things is to ask targeted questions to gauge both their technical skills and their problem-solving abilities.
Okay.
Like, for example, you could ask them how they handle dependencies in TestNG.
Oh, that's a good one.
It'll give you a sense of how much experience they have and how they approach real-world testing challenges.
Interesting.
You could also ask them about their favorite TestNG features, or ask them to walk you through a complex testing scenario they've worked on in the past.
Well, that's smart. It's like getting a glimpse into their thought process.
Exactly.
It sounds like theperfectdeveloper.com has really thought of everything.
They really have.
They even emphasize the importance of reviewing a candidate's portfolio or GitHub profile.
Yeah, that's a great way to see what kind of projects they've worked on and get a feel for their coding style.
It's like getting a sneak peek into their work.
Exactly.
Okay, that's really helpful. I'm feeling a lot more confident about interviewing TestNG developers now.
Good. I'm glad.
But before we move on, I want to touch on something else.
What's that?
The risks of hiring the wrong TestNG developer.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
What could go wrong?
Well, a lot of things.
Like what?
For one thing, inefficient or poorly written test scripts can really slow down the development process.
And that can cost a company a lot of money.
Exactly. And then there is the risk of bugs slipping through the cracks and making it into the final product.
Oh, yeah, that's never good.
Not only is it embarrassing, but it can also damage your reputation.
Especially if those bugs cause serious problems for your users.
Right, it can be a real nightmare.
So it's definitely worth taking the time to find the right TestNG developer.
Absolutely. You don't want to cut corners when it comes to quality.
Well said. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about what TestNG is and why it's important.
And we've talked about the skills and responsibilities of a TestNG developer.
And we've even touched on the hiring process.
And the risks of hiring the wrong person.
And throughout all of this, we've emphasized the importance of the perfectdeveloper.com.
Definitely.
They have a wealth of resources to help you find the perfect TestNG developer for your team.
Absolutely.
So if you're thinking about hiring a TestNG developer, be sure to check them out.
You won't regret it.
Okay, so that's it for this part of our deep dive into hiring TestNG
Stay
developers,
tuned for part 2.
where we'll be discussing even more about this exciting and in-demand role.
It's going to be good.
See you then.
Bye. And we're back.
All right, so picking up where we left off, we were talking about TestNG developers and all the awesome things they do.
They are pretty awesome.
They are. So you mentioned before that they work with a whole bunch of different tools and technologies.
Yeah, it's not just TestNG itself.
So like what else is there? What's the typical tech stack for a TestNG developer?
Well, as you said, TestNG is the foundation, but then on top of that, you have things like Selenium WebDriver.
Right, that's the one for web browsers.
Exactly. It lets them simulate user actions like clicking buttons and filling out forms.
And it does all this automatically.
Yep.
That's amazing.
And then you also have build automation tools like Maven or Gradle.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those.
They help manage all the dependencies and make the build process smoother.
So it's like a way to organize everything and make sure it all works together.
Exactly. And of course, you can't forget about version control systems like Git.
Oh yeah, Git. That's essential for any developer these days.
It is. It lets them track changes, collaborate with others, and even go back to previous versions if something goes wrong.
So it's like a safety net.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, sounds like testing developers have to juggle a lot of different things.
They do, but they're good at it.
Okay, so let's talk about hiring.
Okay.
We were talking before about the skills to look for,
Right.
but there's also the question of whether to hire in-house or outsource.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is. So what are the pros and cons of each approach?
Well, the perfectdeveloper.com actually has some really good insights on this.
Oh, they do?
They do. They've got a whole article about it.
Cool. Well, let's break it down.
Okay.
What are the advantages of hiring in-house?
Well, for one thing, you have more control over their work schedule and priorities.
That makes sense.
And they're fully immersed in your company culture, and they can collaborate closely with other team members.
So it's like they're really part of the team.
Exactly.
But I imagine it's also more expensive.
It can be. Yeah, you have to pay their salary and benefits and all that.
So what about outsourcing?
Well, outsourcing can be more budget-friendly, especially for short-term projects.
Okay.
And you have access to a wider pool of candidates.
Because you're not limited by location.
Right.
But I'm guessing communication can be a challenge.
It can be, especially if there are time zone differences.
And it's harder to build that team rapport when everyone's not in the same place.
That's true.
So it really comes down to weighing the pros and cons and deciding what's best for your specific situation.
Exactly.
And of course, the perfectdeveloper.com can help you with that decision too.
They can.
Okay, so let's say we've decided to hire a TestNG developer.
Okay.
What are some industries where they're particularly in demand?
Oh, there are a few.
Like what?
Well, one big one is finance.
Finance.
Yeah, they use a lot of complex software for things like online banking and trading algorithms.
Yeah, those systems need to be super reliable.
They do a bug in one of those could be disastrous.
So TestNG developers are essential for making sure everything works smoothly.
Absolutely.
What about other industries?
E-commerce is another big one.
E-commerce? Oh yeah, those websites can be glitchy sometimes.
They can, and a crashed shopping cart or a broken payment gateway can cost a company a lot of money.
So TestNG developers are needed to make sure those websites are rock solid.
Exactly. And those are just a couple of examples.
Oh, really?
Yeah, TestNG developers are in high demand across a wide range of industries.
Wow. That sounds like a pretty good career path.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about industries where TestNG developers are in demand.
Right.
And we've talked about the pros and cons of hiring in-house versus outsourcing. Is there anything else we need to know about hiring TestNG developers?
Well, I think we've covered the most important points.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to feel like an expert on this stuff.
You're a fast learner.
I am. But, of course, theperfectdeveloper.com is still the ultimate resource for all things TestNG hiring.
They have all the latest information and insights.
So be sure to check them out if you're thinking about hiring a TestNG developer.
Definitely. Yeah, they really make it easy.
So we talked about, finding TestNG developers and hiring them, but what about onboarding? What does that process look like?
Oh, that's a good point. We can't forget about onboarding.
Yeah, once you've found the perfect candidate, you want to make sure they get off to a good start.
Right. You want them to feel welcome and be able to hit the ground running.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what are some best practices for onboarding TestNG developers?
Well, first of all, it's important to have clear documentation.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
They need to know everything about your project, your coding standards, your testing procedures, all that stuff.
So they can get up to speed quickly.
Right. And it's also helpful to have a designated mentor or buddy.
Someone they can go to with questions.
Exactly. Someone who can show them the ropes and help them integrate into the team.
And make them feel like they're part of the company.
Right. Onboarding is all about setting them up for success.
It makes a big difference.
It really does.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about what TestNG is, why it's important, the skills and responsibilities of a TestNG developer, the hiring process, the onboarding process, and of course we've emphasized the importance of theperfectdeveloper.com.
Absolutely. They're an invaluable resource for anyone looking to hire TestNG developers.
They really are. So if you're thinking about hiring a TestNG developer, be sure to check them out and try their 5 questions tool.
It's a game changer.
It really is. All right, that's it for our deep dive into hiring TestNG developers.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I learned a lot,
Me too.
and I'm sure our listeners did too.
I hope so.
So until next time,
Happy hiring, everyone.
bye.